Welcome. Welcome to Alchemist X Innovators Inside, the podcast where we explore the world of corporate innovation and dive deep into the minds of thought leaders, high achievers, and risk takers. I'm your host, Ian Bergman, and together we'll uncover the challenges, triumphs, and secrets behind successful innovation journeys. Whether you're an aspiring entrepreneur, an industry veteran, or simply curious about the ever-evolving landscape of innovative ideas and what it takes to put them into practice, this is the podcast for you. So, grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and let's embark on this exciting journey together. Christy, welcome to the podcast.
I've been with Alchemist now. I just came on. See, so my original.
This is what I get for inviting a colleague onto the podcast. Point well taken. Well, for those who don't know her, Christy Canida is a senior director at Alchemist, and she came on board a little over a year ago and has just been doing incredible work with our product offerings, with our coaching across the board. I'm going to let her sort of talk about her background, but Christy, I'm really excited to have you here so that we can have our one-on-one in front of everyone else and also maybe have a conversation about Alchemist or about innovation. Well, that's really true. Well, let's use that as a jumping off point. Tell us about yourself. You've got such a cool and kind of eclectic background. So what brings you to Alchemist in this conversation today? Yep.
Thank you. It is a delight to be here, Ian.
That's not an 18-month MBA.
This is the best way I figured out to get out one-on-one with you in the last couple of weeks, given all the travel we've been doing. Well, I would say I've been with Alchemist for about 2 years now. I just came on full-time about a year ago.
Sure.
Well, let's see. So my original degree is in
Web
biotech
2.0, the hot new thing.
And I worked in biotech labs, did a short stint in graduate school, realized that
I've been told it's a secret contract, though. No one ever actually has shown it to me yet.
The graduate program I was in at Tufts Medical averaged 7.5 years, and I was working in mouse models. So no, that is not. And so I realized that, in fact, I did not want to be doing this. And so I dropped out of grad school, which, quite frankly, I think is the smartest thing I did in my early career, and went into large biotech. I did take a short decompression stint working at the New England Aquarium doing necropsies on giant sea mammals, but we can come back to that later if relevant. So we moved out to California, the Bay Area, and I worked at Bayer. Did that for a couple of years.
Of course.
And even though the idea working in biotech is you get quick results, you actually get a product in the hands of an end user, it's still slow. It is still slow, and it's very bureaucratic, and it's highly regulated.
I'm guessing there's an epiphany coming here.
To Web 2.0 startup, I said, absolutely, this is a great idea. Well, when you move to the Bay Area, you are obligated to join a startup. Did you know that there's a thing that they have you sign when you move into the area? So the interesting thing is my husband and his friends from grad school had started a design and consulting firm. And so they did internal projects and took contract work in order to pay the bills. And one of the projects that they built for internal use only was a project sharing tool. Because in graduate school, they had taken up kite surfing and were documenting these things, hard coding the HTML in 2000 with schematics and tutorials. And they'd take their kite surfing equipment to the beach and break it and then document how it went and make more. Because, of course, they were at the MIT Media Lab and we had access to an awful lot of really, really cool equipment that is now much more commonplace, right? Like laser cutters and water jets and things like that. So just built this internal tool. And I was posting on it. They were posting on it, all the things we were doing. Everything from recipes to art projects,
Still
to
close to the
LED
customer.
projects, to kite surfing projects. Yeah, that was fun. And so we said, oh, here, some friends, you can use this too. And then suddenly the realization dawned that people who we did not know were using it.
They nerd
So at
out
that
on the
point,
side.
I still had
Of course
a real
they
job.
do.
But we realized that this was potentially a company. And so when it spun out, I decided, I really just am not enjoying this biotech job. I want to do something that is much closer to an end user. And quite frankly, project sharing website, it's a hobby, right? This is a lifestyle company.
That's really
that
cool. I want to let you continue here, but you said something
Instructables.
interesting. You said
It's
a
still
poster
around.
child
We
for
were acquired by
acquisition
Autodesk
or
in
startup
2011.
acquisition. What does that mean?
And honestly, we're really a poster child for acquisition, which was a fascinating thing.
Yeah, that's
That
tough.
was
These
not
things
who we
fail left and
expected
right.
to be acquired by. We had met all of the media companies that we thought were going to acquire us over the course of the years between 2005 and 2011 when we finally were acquired. And Autodesk was a little bit of a surprise. But the delightful thing is we were acquired into a bit of a skunk works.
Well, yeah. Well, you worked out the
so
implications.
Autodesk, who makes all the giant 3D modeling software for professionals, had come to the realization that hobbyists also do things, right? All the engineers who use their software professionally, they have hobbies. They do. And so all the entry-level software, they also acquired Tinkercad, for example, and they now own Inkle. So all the things that people were using on their side projects, they were trying to figure out how to talk to those people. And as a project sharing and documentation website, we knew all of those people. We were all of those people. And so we came on to help them figure that out.
Sure.
Part of what that means is figuring out how you can work within the larger company. Right. Not to say that there were not growing pains, but I think that the fact
what's
that
amazing
we
to me
came
about
into
this
a bit
is
of a
you're
startup
not
bubble
framing it in this way,
really made the
but
transition
you're
much
living
easier.
not just a poster child of sort of
We did have to
acquisition,
do
but you were
things
living
like,
a poster
say,
child
stop running
for a form of
contests
corporate
worldwide
innovation
for a
that
little
entire
bit while
time,
we,
right? You're running
you know
internal,
what, let's
external.
not go into this bit. We're going to stop.
There you go.
Yeah. But it was really nice to go into a bit of a startup bubble and have a transition period and work with other startups. And we had a couple of years to do that. And then we built out Pier 9, which is
the
a
whole
really
theme of this
gorgeous
podcast, right, are the
space
trials,
right
challenges,
next
and
to the
tribulations
Exploratorium
and
on the San Francisco
successes
waterfront.
of
And so the
trying to
idea
run
there
innovation
was
through
to
the lens of
take
startups. And
the
so
professional
you've lived it, right?
software
You've lived through
with
the
the end
acquisition,
users
bring it in.
and figure out
Of
what that
course,
experience looked
there's
like.
pains
It was really
and growing
quite fun to
pains and
see people
absorption pains,
who
but
were building the software
you
and
lived
maybe
the
hadn't
path of
touched a
hackathons, you
machine
lived the
since
path
they
of
were in
community engagement,
college.
you lived the path of
Come in
bringing
and
new
try and
ideas
use a
and
CNC
technology into a
mill.
company. And it
But
sounds
the
like
fact that
it
we were really
was
pushing
successful.
on this meant that some of these connections got made between the end users and the professional users and the writers of the software.
Yeah.
And so what we started doing over the course of years was helping bridge those gaps. So I was there for almost 10 years, which was about, I would have expected 2.5, almost exactly. Absolutely. It was intentional corporate innovation.
Yep.
Right? So this specific group was put together to try and stretch the idea of what was possible within a large company, and specifically move it towards a more flexible, end-oriented, user-oriented company.
I don't. I don't want to hear it, and I don't want to send our audience into a panic. Yeah.
Well, big companies are big ships that move very slowly, right? They turn very slowly, but once they get going, they move fast. And when I look back 10 years later, I would not have imagined the level of change that
And
Autodesk went
patterns.
through in those 10 years. It was really striking. And I spent that 10
We
years
do. And patterns
functioning as an
are
agent to change
replicable
within
to an
that
extent.
company.
History can
Kind of
predict
the
the
pointy end of
future.
the spear
So
for
let's
lots
talk
of
about that,
very,
because
very interesting
you
cross-company
also
projects,
interact with a
helping to
lot of
work with some
founders
of the
and
founders
startups.
that came in, because
And you have
Autodesk,
been for a
like many
while.
large
So I don't
companies,
know,
does
how
a
many
lot of
startups do you think you've talked to in the last
full
4 or 5
acquisitions
years?
and tech transfers. So I did a lot of work
Yeah, incredible.
that was cross-company, that was aimed at changing culture, that was aimed at changing process and procedures, that was aimed at modernization. I will not tell you about the details of integrating GDPR across 256 products, services, and systems all on different stacks, but it got done.
What's cool, what's neat, and what's next?
But
Okay.
nevertheless, the point is, when you bring in a startup
Well,
to a large
okay,
company,
you just framed up the
sometimes
whole
it goes
future of our, or
sideways
the whole next
if you're
section of
not
our
intentional.
conversation here, because that's really
But
cool. So
there are
you've been
ways to
working
bring
with
change to
Alchemist for a
large
while. You
institutions.
joined full time, and as you
And
say, you
the
talked to
things that I
hundreds,
saw
thousands of
succeed
startups,
and the
and
things that I saw
you've also
fail,
talked
they're
with
patterns.
our government and our
And
corporate
I've seen
partners
this
about what they're
across
trying to
other
accomplish
companies
in the
in other
innovation space.
industries,
So what's cool, what's
right?
neat, what's next?
All of us who do this, we
Let's
talk to each
talk
other.
about this. Where is this drive for what's next coming from, in your view? Like, you've talked to a ton of founders that are building what's needed. You've talked to large organizations that are trying to buy or build or partner around what's needed. Where is this drive
Absolutely.
coming from?
Well, I've probably worked fairly deeply with a couple of hundred.
The images in my
And then, of
head,
course,
it's
we
a
review
curious little
thousands,
primate
and we
poking at
interview,
like a deep blue
again,
supercomputer with a
hundreds, if
stick
not
and like getting
thousands.
shocked. And
So
I think I'm
I
gonna like
love
try and get
being at
Midjourney to
this
produce an image
intersection
like
at
that,
Alchemist, where I
put it
get
on my
to
business
see.
card. But in the meantime,
It's not even right to call it deal flow.
so we like to poke
Deal
at things
flow
with sticks.
suggests
Okay, so
that
I was having
I'm
a
looking at this
conversation with someone
VC
earlier
eye.
today that I thought was
I'm looking
really,
at this
really
with
fascinating.
with
And
a
they
what's
asked
good
me
for
a simple
society
question.
eye. I want to
Is
see
the
what's
world
cool
of
and what's neat and
innovation,
what's
is it
next.
proactive or is it reactive? Meaning, are we sitting
Yeah,
there
I
being
feel like
futurists and envisioning what's
I get
possible
to
and
peek
setting
into the
out and trying
future.
to build it? Or are we saying, oh, neat, here's a new tech, here's a new capability. Oh, yikes, here's a problem. And we're reacting to that and trying to solve solutions. So as you look across all these innovation conversations that you have, all of these startup conversations, what do you think? Are the curious primates poking things with stick
Right.
being proactive or reactive? Yeah.
I think it's an innate human drive, right? We are curious little primates, and we like to go poke at things with sticks.
We're never satisfied. It is such an interesting concept in the space of innovation. And I feel it. I feel it in, let's say, generative AI, right? We've been creating things with Dolly and Midjourney as a society for what, a year, a little over a year, basically. It has not been that long. And this stuff's become commonplace. Or we see cars that can almost kind of sort of drive themselves. Not quite, but they're darn close.
Honestly, I
No
think
one made
that
it
the
through.
people who sit down and have serious business future conversations and isolate themselves and have deep thinky thoughts about the future, change
That
does
is a
not come from
treat. And
there.
it's, I think, sometimes
That
separates
is not
those
where
of us
things
that are
come
immersed
from.
in this
I
world
think that change
from,
comes from people who are
others that are just
dissatisfied
trying to kind of keep up
and
with
they
the
are trying to
craziness that's
fix their
changing in their
problem.
world. But
They
I
see
want
a
to keep going down
possibility
this
of
path. So
something
I
better.
buy your thesis
But the
that
idea of the
most
hedonic
innovation
treadmill,
comes from
that once
challenge,
you
pain,
are
frustration.
accustomed
It
to
comes from these
something, it
negative
stops
emotions.
being as delightful as it was when it was new.
Okay.
That this is actually a superpower for
Okay.
humans because we constantly want more. We want improvement. We want novelty. Yeah, we're never satisfied. You get used to it, and that becomes your new baseline. And so you have to up the gain. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember the first DARPA challenges where everyone ended up in the sand dunes, right? No one made it through. I think this is really cool. And I think that I'm delighted that I get to take for granted the pace of innovation. That feels like a treat.
Now, is this weird in an inspirational way, or is this weird in a whoa, like curiosity-inducing way? What is it
Well, some
about
of
this
it also,
stuff
no.
that
Some
made
of it
it go
also comes from
viral, and what did people do
curiosity,
with it?
boredom and curiosity, right? Because this is again why things that are normally seen as negatives are a superpower, right? Hedonic treadmill, oh, that's terrible. People just get so frustrated and annoyed. Ah, yes, but it allows us to do things that to keep upping our expectations. And then things like various forms of non-neurotypical brains. If you want to go super, super, super deep on something, if you want to really geek out on a specific topic, and then you talk to your friend who has also really, really gone deep on some completely unrelated area, the two of you run into each other and you realize that there's an overlap. So, one of the things that I figured out early on was that the interstitial overlaps is where the really interesting things happen. That's 110% true when it comes to hobbyist
So
projects.
you've talked to
Right.
out
So
of
if
all
you
these
looked at
startups
the
you're
things
talking
on
to, how
Instructables
many,
that
like
got viral
ballpark,
internet
how
pickup,
many are
it was the
born
weird
from
stuff, right? It's
curiosity
not,
or
this is the
opportunity, and how many are
master's thesis
born
robot I
from
built. It's
yikes, I
more
hate
things
this?
like, I learned how to do taxidermy. So I taxidermied a mouse and I put
Yeah,
duck
let's
feet
do
on
it.
it.
Yep.
Well, I think this is the sort of thing that captures people's attention, right? Again, little monkey brains, we like novelty. We like the unexpected. That's why jokes work. So our brains are
Yeah.
primed for this kind of thing. And right now we have infinite information. So the question is, how
So
do you
the
curate that
unfair
infinite information
advantage,
in
because
a
I
way
think
that
that's a really
surfaces the
important
things that you
concept in
need to know
successful
when you
early
need to
stage
know it?
founders. Does that come
And
from that curiosity
you
you
can
were
again
talking
have
about? Does
people
that
who
come
go
from that
deep on
lived
subjects
experience?
bounce off each other, right? You can do the Steve Jobs, let's make all the Pixar people go to the same bathrooms and eat at the same cafeteria, so that you have those random collisions and that serendipity. Well, you can also do things like do random walks through Wikipedia and just go deep on reading all the weird stuff and then go to sleep. And then the next morning you come up with a crazy idea that should never work, but you're going to try it anyway. Well, I'll tell you what I am not interested in. Can we start with that? I am not interested in,
Yep.
as an MBA, I have analyzed this segment and I have determined it is undermonetized. That to me is, I will stay far away from that. I will not fund that. I will be very, I will give you a low score if I'm trying to pick an accelerator cohort, because to me,
It's a
you
lived
don't have any skin in
experience.
the game and you don't have a deep understanding. You don't have an unfair advantage there. Well, curiosity gives you deep knowledge.
And the most likely
Curiosity gives
to
you the
succeed
opportunity
means
to really
the most
dig in
likely to drive
and figure out
innovation,
whether
change,
it
behavioral
matters to you
patterns,
in some
something
fundamental way.
that is kind
I
of
collect
hopefully
weird data.
incrementally or step
And
function better in the
if
world.
you ask me to give you weird data points, I'm going to just blink. But if something triggers it, I'll go, oh, wait, here's something that's relevant. And that's the way it works, is you just collect all these things. And then when you see a problem that has been festering for a while, you say, all right, we're going to try this. I'm going to solve this problem. This is my problem.
I feel like you've pretty much explained the entire Seattle startup ecosystem, or at least how it started.
Community safety
But okay, so this is really interesting, because let's come back to this question
These are all
that was getting
mission-driven
asked
companies.
earlier today.
You have people who are trying to solve problems around health.
I'm going to posit that you're
ethical
positing, so I'm putting words in your mouth. I'm going to posit
safety
that you're
and
saying
security and
humans
community management, things like this.
Inherently reactive.
All of these
in
are problems that they or their loved ones face.
That curiosity, that drive.
These are all
to do
things that
better,
they care deeply about.
That drive to like proactively change something
direct
for the
or
better,
indirect
not be happy with the status quo.
Right, they have skin in the game.
Is critical, because without that, we would
Founders
just be kind of wallowing in our unhappiness and those processes that haven't changed in 30 years.
That to me is the most likely to succeed, because they will not stop.
Well, somebody has to be a customer. Yes.
Yes. And then even when you get into, say, B2B SaaS products, the ones that work are the ones that have been started by folks who have used the legacy systems and have just had it up to here. And they're going to build something that actually works, damn it. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So I want to connect this back to the larger organization. So a bunch of the folks that are going to be listening to this pod are sitting in Fortune 500 enterprises. Some of them are in the government sector. And they're sitting there thinking, I need to tap into this fire hose of ideas. I need to tap into the energy of entrepreneurs and startups.
And then not everyone should do this all the time.
I just need to keep up with the change in the world,
have a day
because it's crazy.
And then at some point you have something that bothers you enough that you have to go fix it.
So they're thinking
something that just sounds so cool you have to go play with it.
Yeah.
But that's frequently transient. You do that and then you figure out what you're going to do next.
And who do you recommend?
There are a certain number of people who like the process and are serial entrepreneurs. That's also fine. Right? They discover that that's their superpower is making things like this work. Maybe they figure out how fundraising works. Maybe they really, really love running small companies or getting from, say, 0 to 1. I think that we would probably see more of that if we had a more supportive infrastructure that, for example, didn't tie healthcare to your employment, that would allow more experimentation. But social safety net is a different discussion for a different time. But that said, risk-taking. Risk-taking is a big part of it.
Yeah, okay, tell us, because I was going to get all esoteric.
Mm-hmm. So, the first thing I tell people who want to do this is you should read more science fiction. I would recommend that you just start with the Hugo winners for the last however many years. Don't start with the ancient classics unless you have someone to guide you through, because some of those don't age well. But fundamentally, there are people who spend their time thinking about what the future could be. And they play with all of these things. And you should be reading this, you should be watching science fiction, because this will get your brain thinking, what if, right? What could be possible? Because the whole point is to break you out of your comfort zone. Because otherwise you'll spend the entire time thinking inside the box. But again, go widely. So I have a really good example here.
Okay, I wanna go there.
This is actually my husband's example. So he was in the MIT Media Lab, and I was working across the street in the biology building. And the cool thing about the Media Lab in the early 2000s was there were all of these sponsors, and they would walk through, and at any given time, you could have to stop what you were doing and explain what you were doing to someone who might be from DARPA, who might be from Hallmark, who might be from Lego. You never knew. And so you had to be able to explain your work at all these different levels.
I mean, actually, isn't that just a lesson of innovation and entrepreneurship everywhere? Like, your serendipitous collisions don't have to happen at a conference. They can happen in the,
and so when
in the
DARPA
dark
came
while
through,
you're reading on your Kindle,
DARPA
your e-ink
is
device.
the US military's crazy advanced projects idea lab. Their whole job is to think about what the future might look like. So they would come in and they'd brainstorm. And they would say, how about this thing just like in Die Hard? And everyone in the lab, who of course spent most of their time doing things like reading science fiction, felt like this was maybe not the most creative approach. They said, what if you used e-ink to paint a fake door on the wall, like in Looney Tunes?
The
That's
glitter
really
band.
Where you're going to go with this.
Yeah, Ian M. Banks. I don't know why that's in my head right now, but entertaining and full of crazy ideas.
A whole bunch
social
of things.
ideas as well as technological.
And they said, oh, that's great. That's amazing. What great. Where are you getting all these ideas? And he said, I read Dune. This is one book from several decades ago. Y'all should branch out.
Amazing.
Read more. Don't just rely on old movies.
This is really cool. So we've gotten a little sci-fi recognition. I mean, honestly, I think that's incredibly good advice to sort of broaden the mind, understand the art of what's possible in the discussion.
And
what about
leverage other people's
everyday
creativity.
Tactical advice? So when you see startups interact with people that are working in larger organizations, what's some of the advice you give to both parties to make for a successful interaction? It's important.
Right. Particularly if you're an introvert, that's a great way to put new ideas into your brain.
And probably should not.
I try and I actually flip between fiction and nonfiction books to make sure that I'm getting really interesting inputs, broadening my perspective. And also, as I'm dealing with lots of companies and lots of different spaces, I want to know enough to be dangerous when it comes to any of these topics that they're working on. Oh, yeah, Ian Banks. Absolutely. But I love the idea that you'll frequently find one little change. And what happens if you make this one little change? And the answer is usually everything.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Well, to startups, I ask them to modify their expectations because a large company cannot move at the same pace as a startup. And yes, absolutely should not, because they are beholden to their current users, their current customers, and also the legal risk
you need to actually have a
different.
Contracting process.
If you're a giant multinational, you have employees in all of these different countries. And if you screw up, the penalties are potentially huge versus, say, there are 5 of us and we're working out of a garage in Oakland. That's a very different situation. So be a little bit of thoughtful about what they need in terms of speed, in terms of making sure that you are meeting requirements around safety and security and reliability. Because what your comfort level is as a startup may not match, we need 5 nines bare minimum before we try anything. That's a different set of requirements. So sometimes that means you do not start selling to large customers. You do not start a POC with a large customer. You start with someone smaller who can actually manage risk with you, or you find a way to do a POC.
Well, that's actually a really good point, because that is hard, right? When you're operating inside of a multinational, you are naturally thinking about efficiency at scale. Like, I've been there. I spent years at Microsoft, and we were talking about small changes that impact a billion people or 5 billion people. And
that means you create a sandbox.
That is almost like diametrically
if you're going to acquire
opposed
companies
to
creating a sandbox,
testing large changes with a small number of people that we do in the startup world. So that is a really interesting tension point that you identified.
Yes. But again, there's 2 different modes here. There's acquisition, and then there's testing and POC and early stage partnership.
Yep, that's true.
So you may have
I've got one more question for you on the advice front.
You may say, we can test in this geo.
I think I may have shared this with you before. I can't remember.
Maybe we aren't even
there's a framework that I used to use
customers.
when I was in corporate hiring.
But you need to
find
find a way to try things that are new and that
there's an interview question I would use. I would actually ask them a very simple question.
And one of these startups
I would say, hey, curiosity.
So figure out a way to test.
Or
and then
compassion.
If you find that this is a good match,
what's the most important for working with startups and why?
And again,
so
this
I'm
means
curious,
incrementally expand.
Christy, for
you don't
your
go
thoughts
from
on these
here's
things,
my
we talked
small
about
test
curiosity.
of 5,000 customers
to,
and then we're rolling it out to 50 million.
But what of those attributes,
you have some incremental
or maybe another
stages in between to make sure that the scaling works.
Do you need to have inside of a large corporation if you're going to be able to successfully work with startups? I said curiosity, credibility, and compassion, but you can pick any letter. It doesn't even have to start, or any word. It doesn't even have to start with C. Flexibility. Okay. And talk to me about that. Like, we talked a little bit about the flexibility of being able to work with an early stage company, breakthrough processes, bite off small parts. But like, what is it? How do you be flexible
to make a difference for a large company, to reach
Autodesk,
materiality?
A PepsiCo, a GE,
you've got to have a huge impact.
Yep. Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm. You said creativity?
Yep.
None of those are I would say flexibility. Flexibility or creativity.
That's a really important point. Amazing. That's a really important point. The whole point is that these innovative ideas, these startups, these founders do not fit in the large organization.
So there's always more than one path to success.
We're working with them.
One of those paths is very well marked, well signposted.
We're running out of time here, but I want to take you in a completely different direction for our last little.
The question is there another way to get there?
There's a lot.
And if you're going to work with startups,
you hit on our need for sort of
curiosity. You need to figure out all of those other paths
for sort of resources to think about this.
They're not going to be able to walk down the well-signposted, well-lit path to a successful outcome.
So, and this is a question
fundamentally you have to be able to think outside of the standard box
what
and say, this is
should
again,
exist. It's a question
how
of
can
ethics.
We test this in a way that is time and cost efficient?
Of startups.
How can we work together in a way that
does an ethical consideration
will lead
come
to
up in
an understanding
of
what we should do?
What does that look like?
But fundamentally, you have to be able to problem solve in a way that does not conform to standard large company thinking. Because that's the only way that you're going to be able to bring some of these new solutions on board, because the whole point is they do not fit. That is the entire point. If they fit, they would not be changing the culture and they would not be changing the process. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So there's it's sort of an emergent ethical normalization or a framework that can come out from having multiple people. Diverse backgrounds.
Well, first of all, I do have a background in bioethics.
No,
so
diversity.
this is a space that my brain goes quite a bit. Second, it depends on the type of startup. Some startups are born from ethical considerations. So again, referring back to those CSW companies that are all mission-driven companies, most of them were born out of ethical concerns. So things like, how might we save the lives of people when they are using opioids? How might we improve the result of police encounters with civilians, particularly civilians of color? How might we increase the success of wound healing in diabetic patients? Right? So all of these are trying to have a specific ethical outcome, and that's basically baked in. I see it much less when you have someone who's just so into their tech. And that really speaks to why it's important to have a variety of people in the room. If it's just me, the only experience that I have is the stuff that's in my head. Multiple people with different backgrounds. And that can be diverse background does not just mean DEI, right? Right? Yes, there's gender, there's ethnic background. There's also age. There's also geographic representation worldwide. There's urban versus rural. There is what subject matter expertise do you bring?
I think one of the things that I'm hearing under what you're saying is that these questions come up often, whether it's sort of overt or kind of under the radar.
First of all, that means that someone's more likely to flag an issue.
Or the need to sort of think about this comes up fairly frequently when you're talking to startups.
I generally try to interrogate my biases for blind spots. I will miss things because I don't know what I don't know. So that means several things. That means I need to surround myself with a variety of people, and I need to get my product out and test it with real humans. And I need to see how it lands with them. I need to get their feedback. And not just, do you like it? Would you buy it? But does this actually solve a real problem? Does it cause other problems that I'm not seeing? Could you play with it a little bit and then get back to me? Right? Some open-ended questions. And again, this doesn't mean that I just give it to my friends and family. This means that I go find a random selection of people in the areas that I might look for customers. So if I'm looking in the US, I'm going to look for people who are, again, urban versus rural, different ages.
Well, I love that about job the potential of innovation, of entrepreneurship and
different
startups.
Ethnic and cultural backgrounds.
Best use case might be something you never even thought about. And that's a good reason to engage in this, actually. It's a really good reason just to connect with startups because you don't know. It's a good surprise. Well, Christy, thanks for joining. Man, we kind of covered a lot of ground in a short period of time, but some really, really interesting topics here to consider.
It does.
For people who want to stay connected with you, where should they go? They follow you on LinkedIn? Are you tweeting or Xing these days or whatever we're calling it? Like, what's the best way?
As we're playing with generative AI, you're seeing a lot of this. There's even some of the classics, like the folks who made some of the sensors underneath the paper towel dispensers. They don't read darker pigmented skin well because none of the people who were doing this had darker pigmented skin.
Well, stay connected to Christy Canida on LinkedIn and follow her work, of course, with Alchemist Accelerator.
But the faster you get it out in the wild,
thanks for joining for this conversation. It was a lot of fun.
What unexpected things
have a good one.
Crop up. but you never know how people are going to use your stuff.
So that's a wrap for today's episode of Alchemist X Innovators Inside. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you found value and insight in today's discussion, please be sure to subscribe to the podcast and never miss an episode. Don't forget to share with your friends, colleagues, or anyone who is passionate about corporate innovation or just curious about great ideas and practical insights. Until next time, I'm Ian Bergman. Thanks for tuning in.
Well, I love that kind of support.